And now we have part 3 of Takara-Tomy designer Takashi Kunihiro. And this part 3, if you haven't seen part 1 and 2, I'll link them in the description of our discussion of his little interview with Kakaku magazine. This interview talks more about his favorites and also a little bit of his history. So up to this point, he's designed over 400 Transformer toys. It doesn't mention it here, but he started in 1982 with Takara-Tomy, working on the Diacron and Microman brand, along with Yoke-san and Kojin Ono. And he says here that he started working on the, quote, Transformer brand in his second year at Takara. So obviously he was working on other stuff before that. Mm-hmm. Who knows what? It doesn't really say.
Well, it kind of does.
Well, but I mean, like before, let's say the Diacron and Microman stuff.
Oh, okay.
Like what it was specifically that he was working on. You know, there was a lot of stuff going on Takara at the time. Maybe he was working on the Henshin Robo stuff. Who knows? It also mentions how he worked on the Brave series, like Gao Geiger, which and he also worked on stuff like Takara's Beast Wars Neo stuff, which again gave us Big Convoy. So he has he has like his resume is some of the most awesome mecha designs of all time. And again, Gao Geiger being on there is a big thing. But he has his top 5 here, which he lists, and he gives his reasons why too. So he lists it from number 1 to number 5. We'll do it backwards.
Okay.
So at number 5, he has Masterpiece Decepticon Barricade from the movie.
Mm-hmm.
And he said that he designed the Human Alliance figure with someone else, and it was a little different from the Masterpiece one. I know that like the Human.
No, I think he's saying
it was designed by someone else.
But not him.
It was designed by someone else. Excuse me, not him.
And he wanted to do it differently.
Yeah, and I mean that's another one of those toys that went through this giant like evolution where it was like you look at the old. The one thing I didn't like about the old the old Barricade. No, not the Human Alliance. Even the old Barricade toy, the original deluxe, was that it was gimmick based. It had like this like punching gimmick thing in his fist, and they weren't really sure. Like, okay, so yeah, he's gonna have this little frenzy guy that comes out of his chest and stuff, and we're not gonna really give him hands. He's just gonna have these like molded in hands. Like it's something that I always hated about Micromasters, but I let Micromasters get away with it because they're Micromasters, which is like when it's like it's the side of the door, but you have to sculpt in the arm. You know what I mean? I let that slide because it's a Micromaster, or let's say a McDonald's toy.
Exactly.
McDonald's would do the same with some of their Transformer-related product. But when you're talking stuff that's a deluxe scale, and a lot of the movie toys were kind of doing that, especially Barricade, which was one of those characters I was kind of excited about. It was kind of a ho-hum kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then when they got around to doing, they did like some newer Barricade toys, with Revenge of the Fallen, and then later on with Dark of the Moon, and then ultimately the Human Alliance. It got better. But now it's like this MPM5 Decepticon Barricade is like the pinnacle of that.
Yeah.
And this is exactly what Kunihiro wanted to do. He wanted to do it right, integrating the weapon into the vehicle mode, which again was something unfortunately completely absent from Barricade in all his toy iterations, except for like his robot replica, which was like, okay, like the one that doesn't transform actually has his weapon. So just really cool that he was able to do that.
I think it also includes a running theme throughout all these articles, is that he always wants to improve on what came before. We'll see that later on with all the other ones, but like he says, he wanted to really step it up and make it like this is the one, or at least better than the Human Alliance one.
Yeah, like especially like here, like what his next one here, Arms Micron AM14 Vehicon. For people who aren't familiar with that was the Vehicon unit that was found in Transformers Prime, but not the first edition one that was available exclusively in Canada.
This one's the car.
Yeah, the car one, yes. And again, it's something that he mentions here. The design had a very like Evangelion, but with big boots kind of look to it, which I see now that he mentions it, especially with the purple and stuff. It really harkens to that. And again, he wanted to do something that was a lower price point, which the first edition stuff was a slightly more expensive price point, even though they still were deluxes or in some cases Voyagers, mostly because of more parts and more paints and sometimes more accessories. I mean, sometimes I feel like certain first edition toys were not as good as their later releases, because I personally like the RC better with the second release, although the first edition, I will admit, had more paint. So it's something that if the RC had more paint, the later, I think it was called the Robots in Disguise release, as we call it, would have been like amazing. But either way, like again, the same thing. He wanted to do something at a lower price point. For anyone that didn't get that first edition one, which was difficult in different ways, especially if you were an American, it was pretty pricey. I remember the prices that people were paying for these first edition toys were ridiculous. Ridiculous. $80 for an Optimus Prime or a Bulkhead. I don't know what was up with you people. I mean, maybe it was because it was local here in Canada, but I still didn't understand it. But yeah, I always dug that mold. It was always really cool, an army builder kind of mold.
I thought I didn't think that they would get inspiration from Ava kind of thing.
Yeah,
like
I didn't see that either.
Yeah, I thought that, like, I mean, I know a lot of designs from animated and various other things, you know, get inspired by what's going on around that time or a little bit before, or even stuff older than that. But I think it's pretty cool that, like, you know, still other mecha animes still kind of make their way into Transformer design still, you know, especially in the toy section, you know. I think that's pretty cool.
And going on to the next one here, and this is an interesting one because it also gives a little piece of news, a little piece of information I didn't know about. So Universe Henkei Cyclonus, aka Classic Cyclonus. He mentions here how the original G1 Cyclonus was actually designed by a rookie at Hasbro, at Takara during the 80s. And I'll admit one thing, it really shows because, and I don't even think it's the rookie's fault, because if you look back at some of the very, very early prototypey kind of designs of the movie characters, and you just go like, oh man, like some of them were pretty ugly. Some of them were pretty, and Cyclonus was one of those that had a pretty ugly kind of early design. And unfortunately, the toy was based on that early design. A lot of the movie 86 toys were actually based off of these early designs and not actually how they looked in the 86 movie. The 86 movie obviously was an evolution of those designs, because you had the likes of because man, like the whole timeline of this is kind of like complicated, but it's like,
you don't have to go too deep into it.
But essentially
we're still talking about the article. You know?
Yeah, but essentially what it was is just that Cyclonus design was designed early on by two designers. Then it was handed off to the main designer at Sunbow, along with Deg Studios, and then they cleaned it up, and then that's what we kind of have in the 86 movie today. This rookie designer that he refers to worked off of that early design, and he mentions, and again, it's anyone who owns the original Cyclonus toy, he mentions how like Kunihiro was like, oh man, it would have drove me crazy if the front nose of the jet mode would have just folded down the back like it did with the original toy, because that's literally how it was. It was just, in order to achieve those bunny ears that Cyclonus had, it just kind of folded back and made the bunny ears, and it's not a good looking toy, the original Cyclonus toy. It really isn't. It looks cool in alt mode, but the robot mode really had a lot to be desired. And again, because of the bad, origins that it had to deal with.
Right.
And so he was very happy to like design that the nose goes into the body and for a cleaner robot mode. And the funny thing is that his Henkei Cyclonus, Universe Cyclonus, I mean, he doesn't mention it here, but a couple of years prior to this getting released, there was a third-party version of this toy that's very similar to that of his design. And I wonder sometimes what the connection might be there. But otherwise, yeah, very good toy, and would see many repaints throughout the years.
Really love this toy. And
I think that, to me, the pinnacle version of that one, if you want to own like the best colored version, is the Rodimus 2-pack with Cyclonus. That's the best color scheme of it. It's the most show accurate. So if you're looking to get one version, get that Rodimus 2-pack that comes with the
metal matrix.
metal matrix in the comic book. That's probably the best version you could get. Where the other versions, I mean, those could be your army builders, could be your armata kind of thing. Number 2 is, and this is an interesting one, Beast Machine's Night Viper. And Beast Machine's Night Viper, for people who don't know who that is, that was the snake that was included in the Beast Machine's Maximal line. And he just says he likes that the tail transforms into his legs. It's a very interesting design. Personally, I would not lean more towards the Maximals when I talk about good Beast Machines toys. It's more of the Vehicons had the better toys. But there was a few good ones here and there. I know Battle Unicorn was an interesting one. I remember everyone thought that was Battle Unicron when that thing was released. They thought it was a misspelling. But, I mean, I could see why enjoy it. Probably from an engineering and design standpoint, he probably really liked the idea of a tail that turns into light. And that's his number 2, so that's pretty funny.
Well, I could see why, because I'm looking at the images down here, and you can see that the tail kind of pulls, the leg kind of pulls all the way up into the ankle, and then the ankle locks into that waist part.
Yeah, to make like,
and then it becomes like the crotch piece, and then the rest of it is the tail. I think that's pretty cool. I could see why he digs that.
It's a good use. Number one, it's a good choice of a kind of snake because they went obviously with the King Cobra, and that gives you more to work with in terms of plastic. Because when you have that hood, you could then like, okay, that's where all the kibble for the robot mode could go. You know, make the hood of that Cobra. And then one of the legs, you know, could kind of make the tail and everything. And again, I guess for him, it was probably a personal challenge where he's probably like, okay, how do I make a snake that doesn't suck?
Yeah, and I think it's pretty clever.
And he did a very good job of that. Like, you know, here's all that kibble. And again, to keep in mind, too, that like he was probably designing this, I want to say, probably 99 going into 2000 or maybe 98. So, you know, it was a different engineering time, too. So I think he's probably really proud of being able to pull that off. And his number 1, which I was actually surprised, but I shouldn't be surprised, G1 Hot Rod. And since it says here it was the first transformer he designed, and the idea was to increase durability. And I can understand exactly what he means from that, which is, and it's funny that he mentions Hot Rod, because actually, out of all the most durable stuff from that era, I think Hot Rod's actually the most fragile.
Yeah. I've seen a few secondhand Hot Rods that were missing heads.
Yeah.
But the one thing I'll give it is that the arms and the legs were still there, but the backpack and the head and the front hood weren't.
Yeah, usually the roof, aka backpack, is usually the first thing to break off on a Hot Rod, mostly because of its transformation, because you have to twist it and stuff, and it's something that with a really, you know, with very little force, you could shatter that peg that holds it. So it's kind of funny that he mentions durability, but I do understand what he means, though, because the 84 and 85 toys, which because they were based on Micron and Microman and Diclon designs, were a lot more fragile, a lot more prone to losing accessories because they had tons of little chrome missiles on sprues and everything that were just a lot more fragile. So to go into the 86 line, all the newer designs, Cup, Blur, going into even the likes of, let's say, Springer and stuff, they were a lot more, you could throw it at a wall and everything would
be... They're very chunky.
Yeah, they could take it, you know what I mean? Where I can't imagine, like, you could throw a robot mode Cup or Springer and throw it at a wall, give it with like full force, and it'll pretty much be okay. You throw like Prowl at the wall, like that thing's gonna, yeah, you know, or even Jazz, like he'll just like something's gonna give because it's a thinner plastic. It was a different. I mean, those are the reality is those even are like we call them 84, 85 toys. Those are 78, 79 toys in Japan, you know, from Diclon and Microman. So it's just they weren't designed for that kind of play. In I guess maybe American standards. So he mentions durability, and that's pretty cool. He also mentions the bar that the legs are connected on, kind of is like on a rolling on like a diagonal rail, and it's funny that he doesn't mention this because what's interesting about G1 Hot Rod is so his legs, how they transform is they like he mentions they're on.
One thing I do want to point out is that remember he's being asked about his top 5 out of 400 Transformers that he's
Oh yeah,
designed.
no, but
And
there's
going back to almost to 82. So if he doesn't remember little finer detailed points that we like obsess over,
oh yeah, well, especially me when it
I'm
comes
willing to give him a pass.
especially when it comes to this character.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's just like the one cool thing about the original G1 Hot Rod toy is, so he has that rail slide gimmick for the transformation of his legs, and there actually is a limit that's set on the inside of the leg that it stops, that leads to the end of the transformation of the leg, and it locks in. But the locking mechanism actually stops the legs early. If it actually, you could actually open up the legs and cut off the stop gap. He actually has molded knee detail that we never see ever. And there's some photos online. I'll post them obviously in the image here to show like that molded knee detail. But there actually was hidden molded knee detail, which actually makes him like slightly taller too. So he thought that the figure was extremely innovative at the time. I agree. I think that of the 86 Autobots, he is, and this isn't even like a bias. It's just looking at them. It's definitely the nicest looking of the bunch. It definitely is the one that when you look at him, you go, there's something special about that character. Like a lot of the things that are possessed in Hot Rod would then, in terms of just his overall design, would later on be very prevalent in the leader characters from Brave series. Like if you look at even like Geiger from Gal Geiger, like the head sculpt and just the overall look and aesthetic, the flame chest, or whether it be a flaming lion on the chest or whatever, it's just, there was something about that Hot Rod toy when it came around that really then influenced the overall aesthetic of either main characters or supplementary main characters or secondary characters later on. I mean, you could look at even any of the combiners from Gal Geiger, Kyoryujin and all the others, and you just see similarities there. You see that head sculpt that's used. But yeah, it's cool that that's his number one. And he also goes to mention what he thinks is the best Transformer he ever worked on in terms of engineering. And he mentions either Revenge of the Fallen Leader Class Optimus Prime, can't argue with that, Studio Series Blackout, which, I mean, I haven't messed with it, but he, as we talked about in the last segment, he seems very proud of it. But that Revenge of the Fallen Optimus Prime, yeah, I mean, anyone who's messed with the 2007 one and then goes into specifically the Revenge of the Fallen one, it's apples and oranges. It's absolutely apples and oranges. It's ridiculous how different it is, those two toys. And it's funny because years later, I would end up, through garage sales and everything like that, I end up finding that 2007 Optimus Prime toy.
No way.
And when I bring it to shows to sell the Leader Class one, and people always go, "Oh, that's the movie Prime." Like, yeah, it's like, I don't know, I saw it somewhere and it looked a lot nicer than that. I'm like, yeah, because that's the old one. You're probably thinking of every other version that looks way better than this one. But yeah, it has its charm. But yeah, I do agree. The Revenge of the Fallen Leader one is the standard that everyone then bases it off of, whether it be the Battle Blades, the Masterpiece, or anything of that matter. It's that's the quintessential, 2007 Revenge of the Fallen. That's the movie Prime until he got his redesigns with Age of Extinction and beyond. But yeah, pretty cool. I really dig his little list here. He has nice photos showing and comparing all the little things throughout his history, and that concludes, I believe, his interview with the magazine. I'm pretty sure there's no part 4, but pretty awesome.
I don't think so.
Pretty awesome interview by Kunihiro, and again, it's cool to see that his number one is Hot Rod. I mean, I went to HasCon and got him to sign my G1 Hot Rod spoiler, so I didn't know that was his favorite. So knowing that now, that's pretty cool. So next time I get to see him, I'll be sure to
I just want to give a special shout out to Shin Densetsu for translating all of this stuff for us.
Yes.
For even to go through, to understand what's even being said.
Old school member of TFW 2005, has been around for the past, oh my God, almost 20 years. Almost 20 years that the site has been around. So pretty awesome stuff. Thanks to him too, Shin Densetsu. So yeah, awesome interview. Be sure to check it out. We'll link it below, all the different parts.